RC, last month, the Carolina Panthers signed an undrafted free agent, Jaylen Coker, wide receiver from Holy Cross. He stands at 6'3", and he had like a 4.57 40-yard dash, I believe. Do you think that he could have a fantasy football impact in 2024? And you think Bryce Young might actually be targeting this guy?
Those are great questions that I'm going to save for the end because we need to first peel back and establish who Jaylen Coker is and whether he's even worth debating on how he'll fit in or what he could do with Carolina. And the reason I wanted to bring his name up and talk about him and do a quick video is I'm punishing myself. I'm kicking myself for missing this early on in the pre-draft process. I had done a brief scouting of him going into the draft. I didn't see enough on the brief tape that I watched where I went, okay, I need to do a full study of this guy because there is something here. And he wasn't highly ranked enough to where it was a name that people were asking me to look at. So it just kind of put Coker over to the side with a mental note that he looked pretty good, but I wasn't really thrown one way or the other. Then when we put his pro day and numbers and outputs into our database and let our computer models analyze them, he came up with a pretty good grade. One of the, I'd say probably in top 20, 25 receivers grades for the season. But this is such a great draft for wide receivers. I've never seen anything like this, and many people have noted that about this wide receiver class. Like, it's 10, 12 deep of guys that you could be Pro Bowl players in short order. If Jaylen Coker was maybe in the prior draft, in the 2023 draft, he might have been a 4th or 5th round pick and somebody that we would be hot to trot on as a fantasy sleeper. But it's 2024, and he went undrafted. But in the offseason, after the draft, after our draft guide is out, I go back through every team and I re-look at all of their undrafted free agents. I've got a pretty good feel for all the guys who were drafted, but the undrafted free agents, sometimes I just have a faded memory of watching 5-10 minutes of their tape, just trying to see if there's anything to them before the draft. But there's hundreds of guys that fall into that classification. So I like to go back on the offensive players for fantasy football and just get another look in and see if I missed anything, or if there's a name that's hanging on with a team through OTAs that I don't even have in our database as with any grade or any knowledge of, and then I need to get myself up to speed. So, but mostly it's a double check on guys I have a grade on and some type of work on. So I come up to doing Carolina, going to do all Carolina's players. I see Coker, and I'm like, yeah, that guy from Holy Cross, he's got some good hands. He's pretty good. Like, I'll throw on the tape and just watch some more of his work and see what we see. And I'm watching him, and I'm like, dang it, Steve Smith was right. This guy really is one of the best route runners in this class. Like, how did I miss this the first time around? And I knew, and to just bring the Steve Smith thing into the conversation, what I remember most about Jaylen Coker is Steve Smith coming out and saying he was the best route runner in this draft class. And then me seeing that and going, you're in my head. I wouldn't say it to his face because he'd probably kill me. I'm thinking, Ladd McConkey is in this draft. So you're already getting too much hyperbole here. Roman Wilson is in this draft. How you can't say that. You can say he's top 5. You can say this guy runs great routes, but to say he's the best route runner, come on, Steve, what are you doing? And Steve Smith's an important part of this story throughout. But my first real thoughts of Coker before the draft was Steve Smith had doing a whole video. He's like a 25-minute video going through plays and proclaiming that Coker's one of his top 20 wide receivers and that he's the best route runner in the draft. And when I saw that initially months ago, I was like, you're crazy. But now that I'm rechecking and I'm looking through it, I knew within 3 plays what I was watching. I was like, holy blank, Steve Smith is more right than I would have thought. So then I just settled in and I'm like, I need to watch some more of this because he really, it's subtle. So you just sometimes as a scout, when it's before the draft and you're looking at dozens and dozens of players at all the different, I scout all of the positions. There's always going to be 1 or 2 guys that I don't catch until I do these rechecks. It's why I religiously do them. And it's one of my favorite things to do in the summer is to go back through every one of the names and get reacquainted with them. But when I put on the Coker thing, I was like, what did I had some trouble sleeping? Was I distracted? What was wrong with me that I did not see this the first time around? Go ahead.
So much good film, RC, right, on all of these receivers that he probably just got lost in the mix, but he's a really good receiver in his own right. One thing I wanted to say, though, about Steve Smith, I mean, some players, they have no business scouting, but Steve Smith's been pretty much on the money. Most famously, right, he called out Jerry Jeudy very publicly while he was doing broadcasts and stuff, and he's been on the money with that.
I should have given Steve Smith more credit. He's going to come back into this story some more. Within the first couple plays of what I was watching, it was some fresh tape I had not seen before. And I was like, damn, I missed this. Steve Smith was onto something. I should have took it more seriously. And he graded, pretty decently for undrafted free agent Holy Cross in our analytics system. So, but there's so many other great wide receivers to scout in this class. I just had Coker on the list to look at, but didn't get to pre-draft. So now I'm doing all of Carolina's guys. I put on the Coker thing, and I'm like, damn, this guy is good. So then I'm like, you know what? I've seen enough. I watched a couple different games, and I'm like, I get it. This guy is arguably the best undrafted free agent player talent in the NFL this year.
Whoa, that's a big
at an offensive position like running back at the skill positions. I'm not going to say offensive line or compare it to defense. So we'll just say the best wide receiver undrafted free agent, and I would put the running backs, tight ends, and quarterbacks into that and say he's the best skill position undrafted free agent. If there's another one that I'm missing, I will correct it and apologize. But I think this is a guy that should have been drafted and should have been taken more seriously. And when I was watching the tape, I'm like, okay, I get it. This guy's really good. Now we got to kind of establish how good is this? How's this going to play for the pros and his situation? But then I stopped and I watched. I'm like, I need to give Steve Smith the respect. I'm going to watch his tape of what he was talking about. And here's the thing that really struck me about the Steve Smith injection into the story. Steve Smith said on the video that he was going through all of Coker's tape in slow motion and rewinding it back and talking with a co-host, and it was good. It was a well done video, but it's only 3 plays. I mean, you could take a lot of players' 3 best plays and get excited about it, but Steve Smith was on the money. But within all of that, as I'm listening to it, Steve Smith says, he said, I talked to a bunch of teams. I got guys asking me all the time who are some players that you've seen that you like and who might we be missing. And he said, I told them all This Jaylen Coker kid, he's the best route runner in this draft. You're crazy not to draft him. And then he went undrafted. Like, what if Steve Smith can't talk to the professionals and I'm sure when he said they wouldn't ask him if they didn't think he might know something. And then if he tees him up Coker, you have to, as a scout. I'm guilty of not taking Coker seriously from what Steve Smith said, but I'm also scouting 700 players in about a 3.5 month span. And some guys are going to make the cut, not make the cut. I'm going to miss somebody. But if you're a specific scout for a specific position, and Steve Smith says you need to check this guy out, how can a scout or a coach not watch Jaylen Coker's tape and not go, holy crap, we need to draft? We can't wait until undrafted free agent period and have somebody else swoop in and get him. Like, this is a draftable guy. And he didn't get drafted. So Steve Smith told this to, I don't know how many people. I'm taking him at his word that he told several people. And obviously it would make sense that he would then sign with Carolina because Steve Smith is close with David Tepper. But even they didn't draft him. They let him go to be an undrafted free agent, which is a crying shame for a guy that so obviously should have been drafted. So I just wanted, Steve Smith was right. And I'm shocked that no one else in football took him at his word or challenged it and went and watched the tape. If you watch this tape long enough of Coker, if you really sit and focus on it, and with somebody teeing up like, hey, I'm not telling you that he's one of the better route runners in the draft. I'm telling you he's the best route runner in the draft. If somebody, a professional with a decent track record, tells you that, you would think, okay, I'm going to sit down and I'm going to watch a lot of tape here. I don't know. And I'm sure that they did, or I would think that they did. And then they walked away and didn't draft him. I mean, that part of the story is just extra disbelief for me that he went undrafted with a guy like Steve Smith pushing him.
RC, is he talented enough to like jump the depth chart, because Panthers don't really have too much at wide receiver? Obviously, there's Thielen there, Deontay Johnson they traded for. But, do you think that he could find his way through the depth chart and get some playing time in 2024?
He's going to make the 53-man roster. I will predict that now. He's already standing out in OTAs. But let me go through. He's got 3 headwinds. Now, if we switch to our Dynasty fantasy brain and go, okay, how do we utilize this information? We got headwinds to deal with here. There's one side of this that, okay, how good is Coker? Let's just say he's pretty darn good. He is a legit NFL, should have been drafted probably 4th roundish or maybe even better type of prospect. One of the better wide receivers in this incredibly deep class. Might have been a top 10 wide receiver talent the year prior type of talent or more. I'm just now starting to I'm going to do a whole Jaylen Coker. By the time this airs, I'll have published a full report on everything, including our computer comps of who he's like and all of that. But for just discussing him right now, because I'm just coming off of this, I'm going to say revelation, but it's not like I came up with something brilliant. I'm late to the party. Steve Smith had the revelation. But the headwinds on this for Dynasty that I'm grappling with of what to do with Coker and how to rank him in our top 300 Dynasty rookie draft prospects is, one, he's got to deal with Bryce Young. No matter what happens to him, he's stuck with Bryce Young, who's arguably the worst starting quarterback come week 1 that there is in the NFL. And the mix of what Coker can do and what Bryce Young can do is a terrible mix, because Coker's a get open quick pinpoint route runner where you got to hit him when he comes off of his break, because when he flattens out, when he's when he's relying on his speed, he's not the fastest guy in the world. He's just great quickness and sharp cutting. Corners are going to catch up to him. If he gets a step on him, he's going to lose that step if they wait too long. And between Bryce Young taking too long to get the ball out of his hands and not having the velocity and not even being able to see guys cutting across the middle because of his height, it's a bad mix for Coker on top of Bryce Young's just not that good. So he's eventually, as it stands now, Coker's got a Bryce Young problem. He's also got an undrafted free agent problem in that guys like him, if he had been a 5th-round draft pick, it might be a bit of a different discussion. But when you're an undrafted free agent, man, it's like finding a needle in a haystack of somebody who's going to take you seriously and give you a push to get some real playing time and say, I don't care that we drafted Jonathan Mingo in the 2nd round last year. You're better than him. So tough luck, Mingo. That's not the way the NFL works. So Coker's going to be buried as the 5th or 6th wide receiver as a rookie, which for an undrafted free agent, that's at least something. He's that's going to give him some life. But the third headwind he has that's 2024 specific, that's going to be a tailwind in a year, but it's a headwind now, is they drafted Leggett, they've got Mingo, they traded and brought in Deontay Johnson, and they still have Adam Thielen, who they're still running around saying is so great. Which Adam Thielen, to me, is one of the most underrated talent wide receivers in the history of the NFL, but he's running out of juice now. You can't be building your passing game around Adam Thielen in 2024, but I think that's what the Panthers are going to do. So Coker has not much of a chance to make an impact this year. However, you look out a year and all of the headwinds could turn into tailwinds real quick. Deontay Johnson could play his way out or just get cut. Adam Thielen's probably at the end of his run. He's got quite the contract, but I think next year be time to start moving on from him. So now you got Leggett, Mingo, and potentially Coker as a starting trio, or them fighting for 2 of the outside wide receiver spots. I don't know if they'd look at Coker as maybe a crafty slot wide receiver. So more opportunity next year on the wide receiver depth chart. But then also next year, we could see the end of the Bryce Young era is 2025. Look at all the quarterbacks that got ditched after 2 years. This year opened up the floodgates of it being okay for everybody to go, screw this Mac Jones crap. We've seen enough of Justin Fields. So I think there will be cause if Bryce Young flops again this year. It's the end of Bryce Young.
It's tough for RC because he's a 1st overall pick. So I feel like he'll get one more, unless he really does he just does absolutely terrible. If he has a repeat
of last year, then they are, because they've given him a new coach. They went out and they got more wide receivers. They went out and bought more offensive linemen. Now it's a Bryce Young problem, and I don't think David Tepper, even though he is not going to want to admit he was wrong, it's going to be better for him to just admit he was wrong, like they did with Mac Jones, like they did with Zach Wilson, like they did with Justin Fields, like they did with Trey Lance, and just go, okay, we've got to rip the Band-Aid off and get on with this.
It might be like a Kyler Murray, Josh Rosen situation. I know that happened in consecutive years, but maybe 1 year apart. If Carolina's so bad again that they have the number 1 overall pick, they're for sure going to take a quarterback in 2025. Carson Beck, Shadur Sanders, whatever talk about that at some other point, but they're not passing on a QB if Bryce Young repeats what he did last year or gets worse.
Just think, what if, paint a pretend scenario, what if the Panthers start out 0-5 and Bryce is still flip-flopping around. Might it get so bad that they're just like, we're going to put in Andy Dalton and we're just going to let Bryce Young sit and learn and recharge or retool, whatever excuse they want to give. Like, at what point, at what record this year
do you bench him? Would
they consider benching him? Because there's going to be a fan revolt. There already is a fan revolt waiting to happen. The fan base of Carolina and the state of North Carolina hates David Tepper. Hates him. If the Panthers, and the Panthers are a laughingstock that nobody cares about locally, if they start out 0-5, and I pulled up their schedule real quick to just see if that's possible. At the Saints week 1, give that to the Saints. At home with the Chargers week 2, figure I will take Herbert over Bryce Young. Then they go out to Vegas. That's maybe a winnable game, but I would give that to Vegas at home. Then they get Joe Burrow week 4. Could be an 0-4 start.
And then they get the Bears, right?
Week 5 is going to be at the Bears, which, if you got them at home, maybe getting them on the road. Let's say they even win that game and they go to, well, let me paint this scenario. Let's say that they come out of the first 4 games 1-3. Somehow they win one of those games. So 1-3 is okay. That's not the end of the world, especially if they happen to get it in week 1. Or if they get it in week 2, it's like, okay, we're not on a losing streak. We won a game, whatever. What would happen if they're 1-3, and then they lose to the number 1 draft pick quarterback, Caleb Williams, in week 5? They lose to Kirk Cousins in week 6. They lose to the number 2 drafted quarterback from this draft in Washington, at Washington, week 7. Another young quarterback walks into the league and just blows, it does fine, where Bryce Young was terrible and is now flip-flopping around in the second season. But Caleb Williams beats him in his rookie year, and does if he does well, and Jaden Daniels beats him, and if Jaden Daniels is doing well, then week 8 at Denver, if Bo Nix comes in and Bo Nix looks way better than Bryce Young does, it's going to be shoved right in their face that why is at the same time the Texans and the Colts maybe 8-0 at that time with the quarterbacks that were taken after Bryce Young. It's like there will be every signal in the world that Bryce Young can't be fixed by Dave Canales, the offensive line, Deontay Johnson. It could be shoved right. It's not like, oh, you can't blame us for losing to, we can't help it that we had the Chiefs, then the Lions, then the 49ers, then the Rams in a row on our schedule. I mean, come on. But if they get beat by a string of rookie quarterbacks, and let's just say Cousins for some reason doesn't play in that Atlanta game and Penix does, you were probably chomping at the bit to say that. If they get beat by Caleb, Penix, Daniels, and Nix in a row, he's done. I mean, unless he was great during that, they just happen to lose because they have a bad defense. But
RC, but barring injury, you can't bench this guy, because then if he's that bad and you're 0-8 and you throw Dalton in there and you start winning games, that compromises your draft position. You just gotta throw him out there and go. If he's that bad, go 0-16, wipe your hands clean. But if they try to hedge and end up in purgatory, they're gonna pay the price. And I don't.
Right. I say, I'm not gonna let you have the best point of this discussion. I'm gonna trump yours by saying the smart thing to do is to do what you said, leave Bryce in and lose and go 0-16. The Panthers are not capable of doing the right thing, so they will do the exact opposite. They will get a chicken salad on rye, untoasted. I can't remember what George Costanza's order was on when he was doing everything the opposite because nothing he was doing regular was working. That will be the Bryce Young benching. Like a smart team would just leave him in and go 0-16. We're going to do the opposite of that.
Throw Dalton in there, man. Throw him in there, so then you end up with the 8th overall pick, and then you have to trade back up to number 2 and get another bust.
Your subconscious did that. You know that the 8th pick in the draft yielded the best quarterback in the draft this time. You didn't even think that through. It just happened.
Hey, man, the 8th overall pick. We've had that. The Falcons have had that 3 years in a row. So,
I cannot. I have to get fact checked. So go ahead and say what you're going to say. But if I'm looking away, no, I'm looking up something for a fact check.
No, I mean, just the whole situation in Carolina, RC, like, as you know, as low as I am on Bryce Young, I just can't see him doing as bad as the rookie year. I mean, Dave Canales is I trust in Canales, man. If anyone's gonna get something out of Bryce Young, it's gonna be, obviously the supporting cast is not there for him, but I don't know. I just can't see it being worse than last year.
Some things God can't do. So Dave Canales is not either. But fact checking myself, this is the most impressive thing I think I've done this year. What did I say that Costanza's order was in the opposite episode, if you remember that from Seinfeld? I was going off of pure memory. I said chicken salad on rye, untoasted. But it was chicken salad on rye, got that part right, with toast.
No,
I was so close. I was so close to getting it. At first, I thought I saw it untoasted, and I was like, "Oh man, that was perfect. How did I pull that out?" But you don't remember that episode?
I've watched it, but I can't recall it verbatim line by line like that.
You gotta scout that tape.
I don't have that recall, RC. That's your department.
The girl was looking at him in the diner, and they told him, "Hey, that girl's checking you out." And they're like, "Yeah, she's really going to go for me." And then Jerry says, because he had just gone off on something like every instinct, Costanza was saying every instinct that he had in life was wrong, and that he should just do the opposite of whatever his instinct was. He should just do the opposite. So then Elaine says, "That girl's checking you out at the thing." And he's like, "I don't think so." He's like, "No, I'm telling you, she's checking you out." And he's like, "Yeah, like I'm going to go up there and walk up to her and ask her out." And Jerry says, "Well, if every instinct you have is wrong and you should do the opposite, then that's what you should do." So that's when he walks up to her. And then I think he announces that he's bald, unemployed, and lives with his parents. And
I think I remember this now, yeah.
And she wasn't dissuaded by it.
Oh, man. Hey, maybe Tepper should take that advice. So at least with football operations, I mean, the guy's a freaking billionaire, so he is smart. He's a successful businessman. But,
yeah,
you know,
he is definitely smart in his hedge fund and investment days. But, man.
Just like how a football ops guy can't go into his business and run his hedge fund or whatever the hell he does, same thing here. Don't get involved with football operations. Lock them in a room. Pay top dollar for the top personnel guys, top scouting guys. Lock them in a room. Walk away. Sit in your suite. And don't throw drinks at people during the games. It's that simple. It's very easy. I don't know why these owners have big egos and need to inject themselves into these decisions, because say what you want about Frank Reich, RC. I think that Stroud was his guy.
And I think it was McCown's for sure. I think they were all thinking that they were going to have the say and that they were going to go with McCown or go with Stroud. And then, in typical corporate fashion, when Tepper wants to go with Bryce Young, they all have to pretend like they like it. Good job, boss. Righto, boss. We're with you. Typical. He's good too. I mean,
you watch Alabama and you're obsessed with Bryce Young. I mean, it was that simple. It's kind of like how NBA owners, right after coming off of March Madness, they look at the teams in like the Final Four and they go, "Oh yeah, I want these guys. I watch them on my screen." I mean, Tepper's been seeing Bryce Young go far in the playoffs with Bama those past couple of years, but really what he should have been watching was Stroud dismantling a Georgia defense that was historic, man. I mean, that was probably one of the best college football performances I've seen from a QB in my life. I guess you can throw Burrows up there too,
arguably
right?
the best aside from Burrow's playoff
Yeah,
performances.
against Trevor.
But I think it's even more sinister than that for David Tepper. I think he made this decision by he conducted and headed up 4 dinners, or at least 3, with the top quarterbacks, had all of the coaching staff, him and his wife, and then the quarterback and his family there for a dinner. And I think Bryce Young charmed the pants off of him, because Bryce Young's a really nice guy, probably great to have a meal with. CJ Stroud probably can come off a little immature, and Anthony Richardson is not a big talker, but Bryce Young looks like he could have gotten an A in his public speaking class about, talking about things he knew nothing about, but doing a good job presenting them, coming across and making it seem like he knew what he was talking about. So I think they were blown away by Bryce Young's maturity at the dinner. And then if everybody else in the world is saying he's a great football player, but he was the one that did the best. It was like a dating game where he went on a date with the 3 quarterbacks, and he fell in love with the Bryce Young based on a dinner, and his wife did too. And I think the wife factor can be a part of this as well. That's where the decision was ultimately made, like the tiebreaker. Like, hey, we like them all. Let's see how they do in these dinners. I mean, you don't orchestrate a group dinner for 12 to 15 people if you're just wanting to have a meal. You're using that as, this is going to be how, I don't know anything about football, but I know about having a dinner and talking to people. Well, that's not the way you should pick quarterbacks.
And I bet you when Tepper made his mind up about Bryce Young and was trying to convince the people within the organization to draft him, maybe he's the one that created this stupid S2 test that tanked Stroud's value so that he could.
Yeah, I didn't see too many S2 test advertisements this year. I wonder why.
Yeah, they were definitely off the mark with that one. So RC, all that to say, as good as Coker may or may not be, he's still going to be handicapped by Bryce Young. So I know you think he's going to make the 53-man roster, but maybe the best path for him is to get on the practice squad and get signed by a different team.
You redeemed yourself. Now you just keep coming up with better thoughts than I did, but I had that. I just didn't get to it. But you're right. The best thing that could happen to him is that the opposite happens, and he doesn't make the 53-man team, or 53-man roster, because they want to keep a 19th guard or something, and they figure they're going to be able to put him on the practice squad, and then somebody swoops in and snags him, and he goes off to the Detroit Lions to replace Jameson Williams, and the Lions go on to win the Super Bowl.
And we'll definitely keep eyes on him on the preseason. But if you guys want more on Coker and RC ranting about Seinfeld and Bryce Young, you know where to find us, ffmetrics.com. RC, any closing thoughts on Coker?
By the time you're watching and listening to this, if you made it this far, if we didn't throw you off with Seinfeld deviation, the full scouting report and his comps and everything, I'll have a full 1,000, 2,000 word report out. I'm just in mid study of it right now. So, but I wanted to jump out there and get ready for this, because I can see already that there's definitely something with Coker, but it's got some roadblocks in the way.